Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to a special Monday night edition of Virtual Learning here with Mr. Viveiros. Today, we're going to continue with our day two work for Word Generation 2.06. So I'm really looking forward to getting to that. But before we do that, since it's Monday night and Monday Night Raw literally just started, we're going to kick it off with the original Raw is War theme song from WWE. And again, I don't own the rights to any of this music. This is for purely educational and entertainment purposes. I'm not looking to monetize this channel out there at all, YouTube. So hopefully you guys will stop sending me these, messages that I can't be doing the music thing. All right. I can for purely educational purposes. But without further ado, the original theme song for Raw is War. Right. So welcome everybody to another edition of Virtual Learning with Mr. Viveiros. It is Monday night. I'm going to take you on over to our agenda before we get started. I'm sure Mr. Scott would appreciate that opening theme song there. Probably takes him back to some of the better years of our lives when we were a bit younger, but obviously our lives are better now because we know all you guys, all you great kids out there. So again, today is Monday, April 27th, 2020. Again, sorry about the late video today, but had to go out and get some shopping done. Had a couple of meetings earlier. So, doing what I can, continuing to keep up with these videos. So we're going to start today by talking about our question of the week champions, which I'm not going to reveal just yet. I'm going to hold my tongue on that. This week's question of the week, how do you like your toast? There is a new post up on Google Classroom. Please check it out. Got some news regarding work submission expectations, the DOOR and Physical Education website, as well as the female members of the DOOR and softball team. Then we're going to get to our day two work, Word Generation 2.06. Does Title IX promote gender fairness in sports and education? We'll review this week's issue, which we started on Friday, and take a look at some of the vocabulary flashcards that I found and I'm sharing with you on Google Classroom as part of our day two post. We'll review the Do the Math section, which is page 33, and take a look at some of the notes I compiled. Then we'll review the math problems and discussion question responses that I've come up with. So to conclude today's lesson, we'll talk real quick about tomorrow, Think Scientifically, page 34 for Word Generation 2.06, and then just a couple of quick reminders that I'll wrap things up with. Our lesson vocabulary, gotta move the camera down a little bit. There we go. The lesson vocabulary for today are the words inequity, adequate, disproportionate, resources, and illustrate. So gonna get right over to where the magic happens, which is my little TV tray here. So, again, want to welcome everybody. Starting things off with a quick recap of last week's Question of the Week challenge. Drum roll. 7 Yale, you are the week 2 Question of the Week champions. You guys had recorded 9 responses compared with 7 Harvard's 8 responses, which was, again, a tremendous effort. I'm so glad and so proud of all 17 of you out there, 9 in Yale and the 8 in Harvard, for engaging in last week's Question of the Week. Already seeing a number of responses to the Question of the Week this week. So we'll see if 7 Yale can still cling to that championship for 3 weeks in a row. However, 7 Harvard, they're nipping at your heels. So 7 Yale, let's continue to spread the word about these Questions of the Week and see if you guys can hang on to your championship. Continuing again, thinking about a couple of quick announcements, just taking a look at my agenda. Yeah, let's get to the work submission expectations. So I was in a meeting earlier today in regards to work submission expectations. Folks, you need to make sure that you have your word generation packets completed by next Tuesday, which would be May 5th, or Cinco de Mayo. Cinco de Mayo for those out there who may celebrate or know. So May 5th, you should have your phase 1 and phase 2 work completed by that time and be ready to submit that. I'll have more instruction on how you will do that in the coming days, but just putting it out there that there is a deadline, so to speak, a deadline to make sure that you get all of your phase 1 and phase 2 distance learning materials completed, and keep them together, as the school is expecting to collect them soon. Last but not least, the Doran Physical Education website. Something new that Miss Eccles and Mr. Baxter shared with me. So if you folks out there could, take a peek at it, I put a link up on Google Classroom. It's included with today's post, so you can feel free to visit that. You could email Miss Eccles and Mr. Baxter. I'm sure that they would be glad to hear from you. And last but not least, our last news bit of the day deals with the Doran softball team. So we got some exciting news that one of the Boston Red Sox ball girls, as they're called, they kind of run down foul balls and stuff like that to keep the game, keep the pace of the game going. But Haley will be joining us for anybody out there that would like to, jump into a Google Meet. I think it's actually going to be through Zoom, if I'm not mistaken, but Wednesday at 3:30, and it is open to all the Doran softball team members. So any 7th graders out there, if you want to help spread the word about that, you can take a peek at the Doran softball Google Classroom. And if you're not a member of that yet, please shoot me an email, comment, let me know, and I'll make sure to get you signed up. And if anybody else out there would like to join in on this, feel free to shoot me an email as well. And I'm talking about the Boston Red Sox as I'm wearing my New York Yankees hat. But, again, just a great opportunity. I think it's really thoughtful that Haley is, speaking to young women about her experiences and how, she kind of got to where she is working for the Boston Red Sox. So that wraps up our news for the day. Going to present my screen now and get to this week's issue. Just again, going to quickly review the notes with you all. All right, so the screen is sharing. Thank you. All right, let's take it back over to this week's issue. So again, our question of the week: does Title IX promote gender fairness in sports and education? So again, just to kind of quickly, not going to go through all of the notes, but just some of the key points. So again, let's recall. Let me zoom in just a bit there. Let's just quickly recall that the article started by talking about Mia Hamm, who is a U.S. women's soccer superstar, very talented, one of the best all around, male or female, soccer players in the world. And it, discussed the connection between her and what she's been able to accomplish in her life as a professional soccer player. And, perhaps how the Title IX laws passed by the U.S. government, which just so happened to pass in the same year she was born, how that law may have allowed Mia Hamm to achieve the success that she has, attained. So, just to kind of bring you back real quick to Title IX. Title IX, pretty much states that no person can be discriminated against on the basis of gender for participation in any educational program or activity that receives federal funding. So what this means is, you cannot be discriminated based on your gender. If you are, part of an institution like a university, a college, or school that receives federal funding. So again, you cannot be discriminated based on your gender in those places. Then we got a little bit into the argument in support of the Title IX law, and it had mentioned how back in 1971, when this law passed, 300,000 girls in high school had actually participated in high school athletics at the time. And nowadays, that number has grown to over 3 million participants today. So clearly, there have been some great benefits of the Title IX law. Then it was discussing the case in the early 1990s with Indiana University of Pennsylvania that the judge eventually ruled that money problems and a desire for football glory were not excuses for violating Title IX, because what was happening was the football team was making a lot of money for the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, bringing a lot of money to the school, and the women's gymnastics team, as well as the field hockey team, wanted to, get some additional funding for themselves and, get the university to spend a little bit less on football and, share some of that money with their programs. And the university was not doing that. And the judge eventually ruled that the university was in violation of Title IX. Then lastly, we had a paragraph about the argument against Title IX. Again, pretty much, to sum this argument up, and I don't really think it's the most detailed argument, but it's it's not really rooted in much in terms of data or facts, at least not yet. But it pretty much states that you know people that are against Title IX think that the schools should, make these decisions. It shouldn't be the government's job to do that. This is what we might call, and if you want to take a look at, maybe look this word up, great word for you to know, but this would be called kind of like a libertarian idea. Libertarian is Libertarian, which is also a party, a political party that exists. And they pretty much, feel and believe that the government shouldn't have really much say in private matters, because they feel like, these universities know their students best. So, that's kind of, the gist of it all. All right, so to get more into the vocabulary, I'm going to take you over to the flashcards. Now, the flashcards are a new thing. I found these on the Word Generation website, and I thought, oh, these would be a great idea to share with the students. They're not as detailed as the 7 steps vocabulary that I've completed that has the sample sentence and the turn and talk, but just going to quickly review the words and the pictures. So the first word is inequity. Inequity is a lack of equality or unfairness. So if you look at this photograph here, this is a prime example of inequity. The 4 people in the blue are starting at 1 point for this race, and the man in red is starting in the back. So clearly, this is showing a lack of equality in this race or unfairness in how this race is starting, because the gentleman in red is set further back than the 4 gentlemen in blue. All right, next word is resources. Again, just to quickly summarize resources. Resources are supplies of money or any helpful items, that help you to, achieve some sort of goal or anything like that. Okay, so that's why, we see here we have a big stack of $100 bills. Can only imagine how much is there. And we have some what looks like camping equipment or first aid equipment. I do notice, I'm just going to zoom in because, in light of all of this, looks like there is some sort of respirator there. And how ironic is that, considering, the whole COVID-19 thing that's happening right now and the need for personal protective equipment, or PPE. Continuing on to the word adequate. Adequate is an adjective, which means as much as necessary, or as I put it, enough, just having, enough, I'm satisfied, I'm good. So if you look at the picture here, we have a gentleman who has an umbrella. The umbrella is providing him with adequate protection from the rain. Okay, he has enough protection underneath that umbrella to not get wet. Looks like a little bit of Mr. V there, especially with the sideburns. All right, 2 more words. Our second to last word, illustrate, which means to demonstrate. So, a lot of times I mentioned this to Haley earlier during our live chat, that illustrate is a word you see sometimes in questions in ELA, particularly like essays, where they might ask you to illustrate, how the author develops a theme in a text. They want you to demonstrate how the author, reveals a theme in a text, or explain. All right, so illustrate could mean to demonstrate or to explain. So again, it is a verb, and if you look at the picture here, we have what looks like maybe a teacher or a dad helping his 2 sons illustrate a drawing. Our last word is disproportionate. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time because that's a difficult word, disproportionate. So disproportionate is an adjective which refers to when something is too large or too small in comparison with something else. So if you look at the picture here, clearly the shirt is disproportionate to the person who's wearing it, which looks like a very young child, right? It's far too large for this child to be wearing comfortably, at least. It looks kind of like maybe he's dressing up like his dad to go to work, because it looks like those pants. Yeah, it looks like he's got some pants and socks on there, so he's definitely ready to go. Guess that would be like a shrunken Mr. V or a child Mr. V wearing my clothes today. All right, let's get out the flashcards and get into today's lesson, Do the Math. So the Do the Math section, again, begins on page 33. We have some math today that I'm going to do my best to explain. Again, ELA is my area of expertise, but I'm sure, and I hope at least, your math teachers would agree with my ability to explain some of the answers that I've come up with. And again, this is a good opportunity to show a relationship between math and ELA, because sometimes we have to write responses to explain how we arrive at an answer in math. And sometimes in ELA, we need to use math like we're using these math problems to come up with data and help us to formulate an opinion about a particular topic. So do the math. Title IX was passed to end gender inequity in universities and other places that receive public money. People disagree about what it means. What does it mean to give adequate support to both genders? What does proportionate representation mean? If more men than women play sports at a public university, is this disproportionate representation automatically a violation of Title IX? Or is it only a violation if female athletes are being denied a chance to play? At some colleges, some men's teams were cut so that resources could be given to new women's teams. Some people argue that men's and women's interest level should be considered. If fewer women than men want to play sports, they say, then it should be okay to have fewer women's teams. All right, so I'm going to take it to the notes now, because obviously that was a mouthful. We have a lot of questions, a lot of things to think about. And what I've done with the notes, again, is kind of simplified everything, going to slow it down a bit and, break all of that reading down. So it begins by telling us that Title IX was passed to end gender inequity in universities and other places that receive public money. So in other words, it was passed to make sure genders were treated fairly at universities and other places that receive federal funding. All right, that's something we need to establish. That Title IX's goal was to end gender inequity. And our argument for this question is, does it really accomplish that goal, particularly in sports and education? Next, it had mentioned that people disagree about what Title IX means because of these following questions. So these are questions that people who disagree with Title IX often ask. So a lot of times they ask, what does it mean to give adequate support to both genders? So, how much is enough for both genders to have equity, okay, or fairness? They also ask, what does proportionate representation mean? So what does it mean for there to be equal representation, right? What does it mean to have equity? All right, that's again an open-ended question. Your opinion of what proportionate representation or equity might look like might be different than my opinion. Next, if more men than women play sports at a public university, is this disproportionate representation automatically a violation of Title IX? Or is it only a violation if female athletes are being denied a chance to play? So in other words, these people tend to ask, does this work both ways? Okay. If, more men than women play sports, is that a violation of Title IX? But what if, more women played sports than men? Would there be a violation of Title IX issue brought to the table then? So then it concludes, it kind of states that as a result of the Title IX laws, at some colleges, men's teams were eliminated so that resources could be given to new women's teams that had not previously existed. So what happened is some of these colleges, had to change the way that they rolled out their sports and athletic programs to make sure that there was a adequate amount of female sports teams. So as a result, some of these men's teams were eliminated, in order to share those resources amongst, the two different genders. So continuing on, therefore, some people think that if fewer women than men want to play sports, then it should be okay to have fewer women's teams. So some people think, it should be based more so on interest level. Like if there's more men that want to play sports, then let the men play, and vice versa. If there's more women that want to play sports, then let the women play. Now, getting to the math problems. So the math problems below illustrate two different ways to think about proportionate representation. So these problems are meant for us to kind of just understand, proportionate representation or equity in the whole situation. So they're not meant to, be like, oh, yep, here's an answer, and you should support this answer. They're just math problems and calculations to help us to think about proportionate representation in a slightly different way. I'm just going to X out real quick of the word generation document. But before I do that, just want to remind you, the option 1, option 2 questions are the ones we're going to be going over momentarily. And then the discussion question here at the bottom, um, you'll see my response to conclude today's lesson, okay? So just so you know, there is a direct correlation between our notes and what you're seeing on word generation. I'm, using a lot of the same language and the same questions. Okay, so let's get to number one. Option one says at University X, the student body consists of 8,000 men and 8,500 women. So at this university, there's 500 more women than there are men. 300 men play a varsity sport. So 300 of the 8,000 men play a varsity sport. This is 3.75% of male students. So 3.575% of all male students play a sport. And it asks if a proportional number of women participate in varsity sports at University X, how many female varsity athletes are there? So this question, I'm going to be honest, I wasn't really happy with it because it's not necessarily clear, because I don't know if we can have a proportionate number of men and women if there are more women than there are men, and that's what you're going to see with my calculation. Just want to remind you, 300 men of 8,000 in total played a varsity sport. That was 3.75% of male students. For females, there are 8,500 women, and they want us to figure out 3.75% of 8,500, which is clearly going to be a bigger number. So my answer I came up with is C, 319. So based on this percentage proportional number, okay, so again, if we use 3.75% as the standard, all right, 3.75% of our athletes are men, 3.75% of our athletes should be female. But if we use a percent, we see that now we have created inequity in essence, because we clearly now have 319 women using 3.75% of all the women, and only 300 men, which is 3.75% of all the men. So hopefully that makes some sense. Again, I'm doing the best that I can here, but I'm just going to explain how to calculate the proportional number of women. So to calculate the proportional number of women who participate in varsity sports at University X, we first need to consider the percentage of male students who play, 3.75%. Next, we multiply the total number of women, 8,500, by 3.75%, which is 318.75. Finally, we must round 318.75 up to 319, because you cannot have 3/4 of a person, or 0.75 of a person. So hopefully that makes sense. But the big thing I want you to understand here is that if we base equity on a percentage, there's always going to be some inequity there, because some university is not going to have an equal number of men and equal number of women all the time. There's probably no university that exists that has 5,000 men and 5,000 women exactly. All right. Or an equal number of men and women exactly. So if we, base this proportional number on a percent, then sometimes we might not have fairness. So maybe it's better off that, all right, if we have 300 men who play a varsity sport, then we should have 300 women that, play a varsity sport. Would that be more equitable? I guess we'll see. Now, next is option two. Now, this is, again, another difficult question. You can see my response is quite long as far as my explanation. I'm just going to go right through it. If you don't get it, don't, beat yourself up over it. You have an English teacher teaching you math right now. But again, this is my analysis. Hopefully my explanation makes some sense to you. I can't necessarily say that you're going to understand all of the math, but hopefully you do. Here we go. Option two. To be in compliance with Title IX, schools have to show progress towards equity. At University Y, the student body consists of 10,000 men and 10,000 women. So, of course, they give us a problem where there's an exact amount of men and women at University Y. It also mentions that 500 men play varsity sports and 150 women. So of the 10,000 men, 500 play sports. Of the 10,000 women, only 150 play sports. Now, then we get this information. And also I crossed it out here because it's honestly not necessary. It's what we would call a detractor in the question itself. to kind of throw you off, but it says a poll of the student body showed that twice as many men as women are interested in playing sports. So, at this university, it's pretty much saying, all right, there's clearly, and I think the numbers show that there's more men interested in playing sports than women. Therefore, the athletic department wants to increase the number of female athletes by 20% each year until there are at least 250 female athletes. How many years will it take? So the goal of this university Y is to increase the number of female athletes by 20% each year. And the question's asking us, how many years will that take for them to achieve 250 female athletes? Now, the correct answer for this is 3 years. Let me explain how I came to my answer. To calculate the number of years it will take to have at least 250 female athletes, we first multiply the number of women who currently play, 150, by the desired 20% increase each year, which gives us 30 new female athletes and brings us to a total of 180 female athletes after year 1. Okay, so what this means is after 1 year, all right, if they have that 20% increase, after 1 year, they're going to go from having 150 women like they have now up to 180. Now, obviously, that's still not 250, so we have to keep going on. So now we have to calculate for year 2. To calculate for year 2, we multiply the number of women who play after year 1, 180, by the desired 20% increase each year, which gives us 36 new female athletes and brings us to a total of 216 female athletes after year 2. So after a 20% increase between year 1 and year 2, we're now at 216 female athletes, which is still not that 250 threshold. So now we have to keep going. We have to continue with our math. We got to calculate for year 3. Lastly, to calculate for year 3, we multiply the number of women who play year 2, which is 216, by the desired 20% increase, which gives us 43 new female athletes and brings us to a total of 259 female athletes, which is adequate enough to reach the goal of 250. So again, after 3 years of a 20% increase, the school would reach its goal of having 250 women in its athletic programs if they're able to increase their women's athletic enrollment 20% each year. If they're able to increase the number of female athletes who engage in sports 20% each year. Again, I hope all of that made sense, guys. I'm doing the best I can with some of this math stuff. Hopefully it makes some sense. And now we're going to get to our last part of the day, which is the discussion question. Now, again, these discussion questions are just trying to get us, kind of grounded in thinking about our opinion and where we stand, but let's not lose track of the essential question. The question is asking, does Title IX promote gender fairness in sports and education? So, with this law, does this law accomplish the goal of promoting gender fairness in sports and education? Okay, this question is a little bit different. Let's see what it's got to say. So it says, does Title IX create new inequities in college sports? Some schools have cut men's teams to fund women's teams, like we had mentioned before. Title IX opponents say that this helps only a few women and it inflicts disproportionate harm on male athletes in sports that don't earn a lot of money, like wrestling or gymnastics. So again, some schools, because they'd have to cut some of the men's teams, oftentimes the first programs that are cut are the ones that don't make, a lot of money for the school, because schools, colleges do make money on their athletic programs, right? Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I'm not talking public schools, all right? We're talking colleges and universities. There's a whole thing about the NCAA. Take a look at it sometime. It's pretty interesting stuff. But anywho, the discussion question continues. Title IX supporters disagree. They point out that for years, far more resources have been given to men's sports than women's sports. So again, those people who, support Title IX feel like, hey, it's always been that the men's programs get more sports, more resources than the women's sports. That's not fair. It's time to make it more equal or adequate. If more men want to play sports, this illustrates the consequences of past inequity. To give today's women adequate opportunities to play sports, they must be given equal funding. What do you think? Is it okay to cut a men's sport to fund a women's sport? If not, where should the money come from? So I'm going to explain to you guys my opinion here. And again, I'm going to read right from the text, at least, my answer that I provided with you guys on Google Classroom in our notes. So it reads, I believe that Title IX does create new inequities in college sports because in many cases, the men's sports programs are bringing in far more money than the women's sports programs, or vice versa, depending upon the school. So in many cases, at a lot of these schools, you have, one gender, their sports programs are bringing in a lot more money than the other gender, all right? It's never really equal, at least as far as I know. So therefore, it seems to make sense that more resources should be provided to the programs that are bringing the most money into the school. For example, if a women's basketball team earns the college $10 million each year, but the men's gymnastics team only projects to earn $1 million for the college each year, then the women's program should not be taken away. So let's say, in this example, that we have a group of guys who want to start a men's gymnastic team, and the projections show that they're only going to make about $1 million for the school each year. Meanwhile, the girls basketball team makes $10 million. Should they take money away from the girls basketball team that makes them $10 million each year to provide funding for a team that's only going to, earn the university $1 million? I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that. Overall, I think both men and women should receive adequate funding based on factors like level of interest and the amount of revenue generated by their program. So I think it should be more so based on how much money is that program making? Again, thinking more so at the collegiate level. And how much interest is there? If there's not a lot of interest, then, should we really offer the program and put aside money if it's not going to be spent and it's not going to be used? Does that really make sense? Ultimately, I think it would be okay to cut a men's sport to fund a women's sport, so long as the women's sport is bringing in more money to the school and has a higher level of interest when compared with the men's sport. And again, vice versa. If we are, thinking about cutting a women's sport to fund a men's sport, I think, again, we need to think about the finances of the whole situation, how much money the program is bringing in and how much interest there is, right? That's where my opinion stands. So going to wrap things up today. Again, trying to keep these videos short. We're right at the half-hour mark right now. I'm going to get to our close. So tomorrow, we'll get to Word Generation 2.06, Think Scientifically, which is page 34. A couple of quick reminders. Make sure to check out the Door and P website. Again, Miss Eccles and Mr. Baxter would love to hear from you. There's a link on Google Classroom. Don't forget to answer the question of the week. Again, huge thank you to all of you who answered last week. Let's see if 7 Harvard can dethrone the defending 2-time 7 Yale champions for the Question of the Week challenge in ELA. Again, you only need a couple more votes there, 7 Harvard. So hang in there. 9-8's a tough loss, but hey, it's still better than losing 8-5. And again, this is all just friendly competitions. But again, spread the word. It's kind of good. You can have that bragging right. You can walk around with your chest a little bit higher when we get back to school in the fall as an 8th grader. Just kidding. I know you're not going to really do that. And again, just the last final reminder. Make sure you're gathering that phase 1 and phase 2 work. Make sure that you have it completed by next Tuesday. My videos will get you through the end of phase 2. Hopefully you've had phase 1 done already. But again, we have to get through 2 more lessons with Word Generation 2.06. And then we have one final unit, which will take us right up until Tuesday. But again, make sure that you have that work ready to go. The phase 3 materials should be ready, I think I was told, by May 11th. So still got some time before you make that exchange between your completed work and getting the new work packet. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap it up with some music. Again, it's Monday Night Raw. We're going to get right back to our jam. It just continues like this for like the next 45 seconds. So I'm going to talk over it a little bit. Don't really know what I'm going to say, but just a final reminder, I guess, 11 a.m. every day. I am live on Google Meet. If you have any questions, you can visit my classroom website, check out the calendar. That will provide you with the link to the Google Meet. All you got to do is click on it. All right, it'll open up a new tab, Google Calendar, blah, blah, blah. Join Hangout Meet. You can join me every day live at 11 a.m. Otherwise, feel free to leave a comment on my YouTube video, shoot me an email, do whatever you got to do. Last but not least, make sure you wash them hands. We're keeping that going. All right, peace out. Love you guys, and take care.